In every corner of the world, behind the rhythm of success, there's a story of struggle, a quiet war fought in silence, with hope as the only weapon. Some stories begin in broken homes, others in forgotten streets. Yet they all share the same heartbeat, the desire to rise above, to transform pain into purpose. From the alleys of Detroit to the stages of the world, music became more than sound. It became survival. Every lyric carried a scar, every beat a memory. And within those stories, humanity found its reflection, fragile yet unbreakable. Our mission is to explore these journeys, where art meets adversity, where pain meets creation, and where ordinary lives become extraordinary legacies. Because every voice matters, every dream deserves to be heard, and every struggle, when faced with courage, can light the way for someone else. This is not just a channel, it's a tribute to resilience, to those who fought, fell, and rose again. Section 1. Marshall Bruce Mathers III, Eminem. His name was Marshall Bruce Mathers III. To the world, he would become Eminem. But long before the fame, before the headlines and controversies, there was silence, the kind that hurts more than noise. A silence filled with rejection, fear, and an unrelenting hunger to belong. This is not just music, this is survival in rhythm. Every bar, every rhyme, every verse became a heartbeat, a way to stay alive in a world that tried to break him. In the chaos of a broken home and the noise of a fractured childhood, he found harmony in words. Pain became poetry. Anger became art. What began as a whisper of defiance would soon roar across the world. And so begins the story of a boy who turned pain into power, rejection into rhythm, and silence into one of the loudest voices in music history. This is the sound of survival. This is the story of Eminem. Section 2. A Broken Beginning. Marshall Bruce Mathers III was born on October 17, 1972, in St. Joseph, Missouri, a place far from the bright lights he would one day command. His life began not with comfort, but with chaos. His father, Bruce, left when he was just a baby, and his mother, Debbie, was left to raise him alone, battling poverty and her own demons. They moved from one crumbling house to another, chasing rent they could never afford. There was no stability, no safety, only the next bus, the next school, the next rejection. For young Marshall, home was never a place. It was a feeling he could never quite find. At school, he was the outsider, small, quiet, and different. He was bullied relentlessly, sometimes beaten until he blacked out. Teachers saw a troubled kid. They couldn't see the words forming behind his silence. In those moments of isolation, when the world turned its back, Marshall found refuge in imagination. He would fill notebooks with drawings, short rhymes, and make-believe worlds, a secret escape from the noise outside and the chaos within. The 1970s and early 80s in America were years of division. Factories were closing, jobs were vanishing, and cities like Detroit, once symbols of industry, became graveyards of broken promises. Poverty spread like rust, corroding families and futures alike. Amid that decay, the young boy from a broken home was unknowingly absorbing it all. The frustration, the anger, the noise. Those sounds would later shape his rhythm, his words, and his rebellion. Before the fame, before the name Eminem meant anything, there was just a boy who refused to give up. A child who learned that when the world won't listen, you make it listen. That was the beginning of the voice that would one day echo through generations, born not from privilege, but from pain. Section 3. Battle Rhymes and Street Dreams. In the streets of Detroit, music wasn't a hobby, it was a lifeline. In neighborhoods where dreams were short and tempers long, rap became the language of survival. For the young and unheard, a microphone was the only weapon they could afford. Marshall was a white kid in a black world, a guest in a culture that didn't trust outsiders. He stepped into crowded clubs and smoky basements where every line was a test, every rhyme a battle for respect. He was booed, mocked, and sometimes thrown off the stage, but he kept coming back. Each insult sharpened his tongue. Each defeat carved another verse into his memory. In his small room at night, under a flickering light, he wrote endlessly. Words became his armor, rhythm his heartbeat. What others used for fame, he used for therapy. The 1990s were a golden yet gritty age for hip-hop. Detroit's underground scene pulsed with defiance. A generation of artists using rhythm to fight inequality, poverty, and invisibility. Hip-hop wasn't born in luxury. It was born in protest. For Marshall, the battle wasn't just lyrical, it was personal. Every verse was proof that he belonged, that talent could break through color, class, and circumstance. He wasn't just trying to win a rap battle, he was fighting to exist. He called himself Eminem, later stylized as Eminem. Behind that name was a promise to never be silenced again. On stage, the shy kid vanished, replaced by a voice sharp enough to cut through the noise of the world. Every rhyme was a rebellion. Every battle was a step toward becoming something greater, not just a rapper, but a symbol of resilience. In a world that told him, "You don't belong," he answered with rhythm. What began in the basements of Detroit was no longer a dream. It was destiny, setting the stage for a voice that would soon shake the world. Section 4. Slim Shady is born. Sometimes, the mind creates another version of itself to survive the pain. When the world pushes too hard, the soul invents a mask, not to hide, but to fight. For Marshall Mathers, that mask had a name, Slim Shady. Slim Shady wasn't polite, wasn't patient, and definitely wasn't afraid. He said what Marshall couldn't, the anger, the sarcasm, the dark humor buried deep inside. Through Shady, he found a way to turn rage into rhythm, chaos into comedy. It was 1997 when the world first caught a glimpse of this new alter ego in the Slim Shady EP. It was violent, raw, and unfiltered, the voice of someone who had finally stopped apologizing. Shady said the unsayable, laughed at the unbearable, and rapped about the pain others were too afraid to touch. One song found its way into the hands of Dr. Dre, the legendary producer who built the sound of modern hip-hop. When Dre heard it, he didn't hesitate. "This kid," he said, "is special." That meeting changed everything. A kid from the broken streets of Detroit had just been handed the keys to a dream. But with that opportunity came risk. Dre's entire reputation was on the line for a rapper no one believed in. When they stepped into the studio together, something electric happened. Dre's beats met Marshall's fury, and Slim Shady was fully born, a perfect storm of genius and madness. What came out of those sessions would soon rewrite the rules of hip-hop. Alter egos have long existed in art, from writers to rock stars. But Eminem redefined it. Slim Shady wasn't a disguise. He was a truth serum. Through him, Marshall exposed society's fears, its hypocrisies, and his own demons, all wrapped in rhyme. He made people laugh, then think, then flinch. Beneath the shock and controversy was something far more human, a man trying to reconcile who he was with what the world made him. Slim Shady wasn't just a character. He was Marshall's rebellion, his mirror, his therapy. The world was about to meet the monster he had built to survive it. And once Slim Shady spoke, the world could never unhear him again. Section 5. The Storm of Fame. Success can sound like thunder, loud, bright, and unstoppable. When the Slim Shady LP hit the shelves in 1999, the world suddenly knew the name Eminem. Overnight, a kid who once scribbled rhymes in silence became the voice of a generation too angry to stay quiet. Fame hit him like a storm. Record deals, award shows, headlines, and controversy. His lyrics were bold, offensive, and brutally honest. Parents called it poison. Kids called it truth. And the media couldn't look away. Then came the Marshall Mathers LP in 2000, an explosion. It broke records, won Grammys, and ignited outrage. His songs tore open every wound America tried to hide, from family dysfunction to political hypocrisy. Eminem was no longer just a rapper. He was a mirror, and people didn't like what they saw. Outside concert halls, parents and activists held signs. Ban Eminem. Protect our children. But the louder they shouted, the louder he rapped. His music became both a target and a weapon, a war between freedom of speech and the fear of truth. But behind the flashing lights, fame was taking its toll. The man who could conquer the charts couldn't conquer his own chaos. His relationship with his mother spiraled into lawsuits, public insults, and years of resentment. His marriage to Kim was a storm of love and destruction, the kind that leaves scars instead of memories. Even as he wrote chart-topping hits, his world was cracking beneath the surface. The Slim Shady he created to protect himself was now consuming him, blurring the line between art and reality. Fame became a battlefield. Every headline, every lawsuit, every song was another fight, not against rivals, but against himself. The higher he climbed, the lonelier it became. Success filled the arenas, but emptied his soul. It was the paradox of victory, to have everything and still feel nothing. In the storm of fame, Marshall Mathers was both the lightning and the thunder, brilliant, destructive, and unforgettable. But even storms must break. And soon, the boy who once survived poverty would have to survive himself. Section 6. The Fall and the Fight Back. Fame had given him everything: money, awards, a name that could shake the industry. But what it couldn't give him was peace. The man who once battled the world was now fighting invisible enemies inside his own mind. Depression crept in quietly, and addiction soon followed. A war without rhythm, a pain without music. The early 2000s blurred into sleepless nights and empty days. Pills became his escape, not from fame, but from himself. He stopped writing, stopped performing, stopped being Eminem. The fire that once burned through every lyric was dying out, replaced by a silence heavier than any beat he'd ever dropped. Then, in 2006, tragedy struck. His closest friend Proof was gone, shot dead in Detroit, the city that had made them both. It wasn't just the loss of a friend. It was the loss of balance, of reason, of hope. For Marshall, the world finally went dark. He vanished from the spotlight. No tours, no interviews, no albums. Just a man alone with his demons. The overdose in 2007 almost ended everything. But fate, or perhaps faith, had other plans. He woke up not as a superstar, but as a survivor. Recovery wasn't glamorous. It was sweat, struggle, and silence. But inside that silence, he began to rebuild. Verse by verse, day by day. Writing became therapy. Rhythm became recovery. He turned pain into power. Then came recovery. Not just an album, but a confession. A letter from the edge of collapse. His lyrics no longer hid behind rage or irony. They spoke with clarity and courage. He wasn't the monster people imagined. He was human, flawed, and fighting. Through recovery, Marshall Mathers didn't just reclaim his life. He redefined his legacy. His comeback wasn't about fame or charts. It was about survival, redemption, and strength. He became proof that broken things can still shine. From addiction to awareness, from silence to song, from fall to fight back, this was his truest verse. The rhythm that once saved him again. Section 7. Legacy and Redemption. By the 2010s, the storm had passed. What remained was not the angry young man from Detroit, but an artist reborn from his own wreckage. His voice was steadier, his words wiser, and his purpose clearer. Eminem was no longer just reacting to pain, he was transforming it. His music began to carry a new kind of weight, not rebellion for its own sake, but reflection. Songs like Not Afraid and Love the Way You Lie didn't glorify chaos. They humanized it. They turned suffering into empathy and mistakes into lessons. Eminem became more than a rapper. He became a chronicler of modern struggle. A man who understood what it meant to fall and rise again. For a generation that grew up in confusion, he was proof that broken voices could still be heard. His influence echoed far beyond Detroit. New rappers from every corner of the world carried a trace of his rhythm, his defiance, his honesty. They didn't just imitate his sound, they inherited his courage. In cultural studies, Eminem's legacy sparked debates about censorship, morality, and the right to offend. He forced society to confront an uncomfortable question. Can art heal even when it hurts? For all the headlines and scandals, what endures is the honesty. He never pretended to be a hero. He was raw, flawed, real, and in that reality, millions found comfort. He became the voice of the voiceless. Today, Eminem stands as a symbol of endurance, not because he was fearless, but because he kept moving despite the fear. His story reminds us that redemption is not about erasing the past, but owning it. From a broken beginning to an unbreakable legacy, Eminem's journey tells us that greatness isn't born from perfection. It's forged in pain, shaped by struggle, and defined by truth. This is more than a story about rap. It's a story about resilience, about a man who fell, fought back, and finally found peace in his own rhythm. Section 8. From Pain to Purpose. Every story has a beginning. For Marshall Bruce Mathers III, it started in a room with peeling paint, broken dreams, and a quiet hunger for something more. He didn't have power, privilege, or peace, just words. And somehow, those words became wings. Those same words that once filled a notebook now fill arenas. The same voice that trembled in fear now shakes the world. From Detroit's forgotten corners to the global stage, Eminem proved that pain is not an ending, it's an invitation to create. He turned poverty into poetry, trauma into rhythm, and anger into art. Every lyric he wrote was a map back to himself, a way to understand, forgive, and survive. He didn't escape his past. He transformed it into purpose. His life became a mirror for millions who felt unseen, unheard, unloved. Through his music, they learned that broken does not mean defeated, that falling does not mean finished, that every scar can become a lyric, and every silence can be turned into a song. Fame was never the victory. The real triumph was survival, the courage to keep going when the spotlight went out. Eminem showed that healing isn't loud or glamorous. It's quiet, relentless, and deeply human. Today, the man once called controversial stands as a cultural icon, not because he was flawless, but because he was fearless enough to tell the truth. He became a teacher in disguise, reminding the world that art's power lies in honesty. His legacy challenges us to ask, what would happen if we all used our pain as fuel? If we wrote our truths, even when the world wasn't ready to hear them? Art, after all, is not about perfection. It's about connection. No matter where you come from, your voice can change the world. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to speak, because somewhere, someone needs to hear your story. From the broken boy in a Detroit trailer park to one of the greatest artists in music history, Eminem's journey reminds us that resilience is the purest form of art, because in the end, the truest rhythm is the one that keeps you alive. His isn't just his story, it's ours, the story of every soul that dared to rise again. If this story moved you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories like this. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Your feelings matter, and your voice deserves to be heard.